Hey everyone, Lucia here from Soul Tribe Podcast. I thought it would be really cool since I'm a big reader, and Lorraine and I always talk about how it's awesome that I can read some books and kind of see my own experiences as an Akashic Records reader and then kind of bring that in and compare it to possible like spiritual related books and things like that. And and also just to talk about books because I love books and it gives me an excuse to read more. So, this is the one that I finished last week, Soul Survivor. And some of you might have seen the show on Netflix, which is called uh, Surviving Death. It's called Surviving Death. And I'm not totally sure, but I think episode 6 is the reincarnation episode. And this case, the one that's spoken about in this book, this case is in that episode. And so basically, it's this kid. It's an infant, it's a child. It's an infant. It's an infant at the time, and they're having these nightmares, right? And I don't want to get like, I don't want to be like a spoiler alert. Maybe some of you didn't like actually read this yet, so I'm going to try to talk about it without giving away too much, which is a little difficult. It's cool if I could talk about it more, but I don't want to be a spoiler, spoiler to someone that might really enjoy the book and get the tidbits, even though you might have seen the Netflix episode. But what I found fascinating was, first, I didn't know that there was already so many cases in the world, and you hear about this in the book. There's just so many cases in the world about it. I've recently gotten into that, like Ian Stevenson and Caroline Bowman, I think her name was. So she worked with I forgot her name now, but she worked with the parents of this child. So they connected with her, and she kind of helped them a bit through that and all that. And thanks to the connection with her, this case kind of came to light to the rest of the world. So that's super interesting. And I didn't know that there's so many cases, and that they found that most cases began when the person was 2 years old, and it starts probably fading around 4 years old. And to me, as an Akashic Readers, I find that really crazy that it doesn't last a little bit longer, because I've always been told from the records and the master themselves that when we hit the age of 7, that's when like our crown chakra closes up. So that's when like it's almost like it's more of an Akashic or karmic kind of plan thing, where it's like once 7 hits, the biggest parts of what we're here to experience and our purpose and our missions and our lessons and who we're going to bump into, like those things are almost more settled into the karmic contract. And so our crown chakra doesn't need to so much direct connection, and we begin the process of disconnecting, or feeling, actually not disconnecting, but feeling more disconnected from source. And that's when our like more struggle era begins, because once we feel disconnected, it's like you kind of feel like you have to fend for yourself, even though you are still connected, you are still receiving guidance, and there's still a connection with the spiritual realm, but it's different, and it's not so download and uploadable. I like to say, like if it were a cloud and your karmic contract is like up there, there's not so much exchanging with that anymore. So I find it really interesting that it lasts till 4, not till 7, for example. Like they start forgetting, but it also kind of makes sense, because at some point the individual needs to let go of a past life, because we're talking about past life and not just your current karmic contract and your Akashic Records book. We're talking about a past life. So I guess that in terms of past life wise, thinking about it a little bit more, like, oh, okay, well, what does that past life really have to do with this one? You might have pending things from that past life, and that's in your karmic contract. So I was expecting it to be a little bit more extensive, more than 4 years old, but it's not. It's the typical is the individual starts forgetting at 4, which is a good thing, because imagine if you remember every detail at, like, let's say, like, I don't know, 15. You remember every detail of what happened to you in a past life, and it was an awful death, maybe it was a massive struggle, maybe you lost a lot of individuals before you even died yourself, and now you have to mourn that. You have to mourn those family members, or even just mourn the fact that you miss your family from that lifetime. Like you still feel like they're your family. So at some point we have to disconnect from that and start with our new character, which is the individual we're playing in this lifetime now, right? So, like most cases, this individual seems to have started those reoccurring nightmare and dreams and memories from 2 years old. At least it seems that way because the nightmares, the mom was able to pick up on them. Of course, the dad was there as well. But it was something, of course, a mother struggles with more because you got to go comfort the child and wake up and things like that. And then the other thing is that they start learning to verbalize, like they can start verbalizing things. And that's when it gets interesting, because in this book and in this real case, we have a family that isn't predetermined to really accept it right away or to stand it right away, because they haven't delved into this. Like if it were to happen to me with my child, I'd be like, tell me all about it. I'd be writing it down, and right away I would believe it. Like I wouldn't even have to go, and even though I would look for evidence, because I would find it super interesting to be like, oh, let's see what life she had. And, my child had another life, and where was that? Like I would look into it as a curious person, but not as like I have to prove it. Like I would believe her. And I would be open to her giving me more information, because, of course I believe it. I connect with Akashic Records, and it's all about your soul having many lifetimes, right? So for me, that would be interesting. But we have, in this case, we have a family who's not predetermined to believe it. And the majority of the book is about actually the father trying to prove the evidence. I'm saying evidence because it's the child speaking, right? And giving information and names and things, which again, I don't want to spoil, but it's like the child gives information and names of friends and names of, in that past life, and where the individual, in this case, we know that it's a pilot, that airplane went down, right? And so that was the nightmare that the child was reliving when the airplane came down. And in the book, you'll hear how it went down. I'm not going to spoil that. But that's the nightmare the kid's having. It's a reoccurring scenario of, I guess that you could say, the trauma and the issues that, the things that you feel in the moment of that happening. Imagine if you're, having an accident, and that's how you died, and then your soul comes into another lifetime and you're remembering that other past life. It could be really traumatic to remember it, and super fearful, right? And so that's how that child begins, the nightmares of reliving it, which also for me makes sense that it's happening when the child's sleeping, because when we're sleeping, our soul can astral travel and go back to other lifetimes. It could go and remember other lifetimes. It could even go to future timelines. It could even go to like visit our friends that are not next to us right now and hang out. What the soul does when we're sleeping is abundant. So many things. So it could be that the soul's just reliving that, or it's replaying, right, for the individual, and they're re-experiencing it. So I don't find it weird that it begins mostly with dream state, because that's when our soul can explore, when it's not so busy living this life and we're fully awake, right? And so that's something that you read in the book, that it's like these reoccurring nightmares, and over again the same one, right? And once the child starts learning to speak more and communicate more, little by little, you get more information. On top of that, the non-belief system of the father leads him to like be a very good investigator, and leads him to like really delve into like, I'm going to do everything I can to get information, because his belief system wouldn't allow him to believe it. So he had to prove it wrong. And the evidence was mounting up in favor of what the child was saying, right? It was all becoming valid information that a 2-3-year-old should not and could not know. And from scenarios of an airplane, like an airplane has this, an airplane has that, and how does that child know that if no one in the family is talking about airplanes around the child, right? And the obsession for airplanes, like playing with the toys. When I first got this book, I was like, I want to read it, because I've been reading reincarnation books and I've been really getting into it, finding it fascinating how each soul kind of deals with it, like deals with past lives. Some of them can come in clear, crisp, and nothing's remembered from another, and other individual souls come in and there's remembrance moments of those past lives. So I find that fascinating. I do think, as an Akashic Record reader, I do think that these individual souls are not just living traumatic experiences. Some of them might be, but I think that a lot of them are here to kind of be messengers in a way, like, wake up, like we're more than just this lifetime that we're living now. And so I find some of that being purposeful as part of their mission, possibly for some of them, maybe not all, but some of them. So what I didn't expect when I got this book was like to be so involved with the family. So to see so much of the family and how they're dealing with it. Like I don't know what I expected. I expected to get the book and then I was like just gonna read about everything the little boy was saying. But of course, like you have to understand the family story of how the family even got the information and why they got it because they wanted to see, is this true? This can't be true. This is insane, kind of thing, right? So that for me was in the beginning. I had to get used to the fact that before hearing from the little boy, we had to hear a lot about the family, but then I ended up loving that. I was like, oh well, now, and as a mom, I was understanding her a lot, and the storytelling aspect of it was really nice. But this made me think a lot about like more about the Akashic Records and souls, and I found that to be like just stopping the book and being like, so not only did the kid like remember the accident, the kid remembered like family members. And again, I don't want to spoil, but there's a specific family member from that past life which the boy was able to reconnect with thanks to the mom's really diligent work of finding this family member, and they're able to speak again. And there's even meetups in person with this child, and the child finding it a bit hard to recognize them because, I mean, they're much older. Imagine if you have a BFF, let's say, for example, that's, 20 years old, and then you have an accident and you die, and then your soul comes back as another individual and you remember all those moments from that other life, but you meet up, somehow you bump into your BFF, but your BFF is now 80. It's going to be hard for you to recognize them, but this boy somehow still recognized them. I guess it's their essence and their energy and things like that, right? So I have to say, like, definitely recommend this book. I love it, especially for someone who might be iffy about, like, if they want to still believe in reincarnations, or, like, they just want to feel like souls are amazing and we progress and we never die. There's no death. We don't die. Like, yes, the character that I'm playing in this lifetime, Lucia, is going to die, but my soul is not going to die. It's going to move on and expand, and then I might come back and play some other character in another timeline, right? So it's just another nice way of remembering the massiveness that is the soul and the expansiveness that, we bring into this world. But in our creative energy, like, I think we forget so easily. We come into these bodies and we're boxed in, and we easily forget, like, what amazing creators we are. And so I think this is a really good reminder to bring you back home and to remind you of what you really are, and you're a soul having a human experience. And yet sometimes that comes with trauma, and sometimes it comes with fears, and sometimes it comes with carrying fears from other lifetimes that maybe we're not even sure of. Like the typical one that I am aware of, that a lot of people in our area have, is of water or waves or the deep ocean. And many times the Akashic Records have told me, like, we have a lot of individuals coming back because we're going through another cycle that's a repetitive cycle, or kind of like a pickup cycle from the Atlantean times. So there's a lot of old Atlantean souls here that are here to relive things, to try to see if they can, I guess you could say, like, improve that cycle and get through it and close it up so we don't have to do it again. We still need to learn things from that. And so we'll find that a lot of people currently that are on Earth are actually very fearful of water. I would put myself in that category. I'm not fearful of, like, going to the beach and going to the shore, but when there's big waves, I am. And suppose Atlantean was covered by a lot of water, so I could see where that came from. And there's no doubt to me that my soul had an experience in Atlantean times. I feel that connection, and I feel my triggers. Like, when you have something that really triggers you, for example, control for me is a big one. When I feel like there's a lot of control going on, that's a massive trigger for me. I'm like, no, freedom. And that is actually because that comes from Atlantean times, where there was a lot of control, and a lot of things where we've seen the last 2 years to 3 years, actually the majority of it is a repetition of what happened in Atlantean times. So we're just going through that again. I went off rails a little bit off the book, but I thought it was a good idea to explain that. Like, this is a good example of how souls can carry traumas and fears from other lifetimes, and we need to, like, recognize them, accept them, and let them go, and try to, I'm obviously not going to get into, I'm not going to take up surfing anytime soon with, like, massive waves. I have tried surfing, but, like, with smaller waves. So, I mean, you have limitations maybe, but you need to remember that you're not here to drown in this lifetime, for example. we're not here to be taken over by a massive wave. Probably. Depends on the person and their records and their experience you have to hear. But I'm saying I don't think the majority of us are here to experience that exact way of leaving like most of us did in those Atlantean times. But we still have that trauma there. But we're here to go through the cycle again and be smarter this time and do it better. So I recommend this book. I really liked it. I think it's a really good read for people that just need to kind of continue to remind themselves of how amazing and what we really are. And especially after these last 2 years where everything was about death, like let's remember that we actually don't die. Like I think that's a really good message. So let's read about reincarnation and let's kick the fear of death, because we shouldn't be scared of death. It's only going to limit us, and fear limits you. And when you have fear is basically the opposite of love. So once fear kicks in, then love is basically out the window during that time. And if love is out the window, then I'm not connecting to my super creator energy. And whatever I'm going to manifest is negative, low vibrational, and it's not going to be for my best, my best alignment and my best lifetime. So I'm going to continue to read books and do some posts for you guys and videos for you guys. And hopefully we can get something going here with just reading books and things like that. I did do the Michael Newton book not long ago. I didn't do it video form, I did it in audio form, and a lot of people asked me for the other Michael Newton books to talk about that, so I might do that later on. Right now I'm like into reading these kind of like reincarnation books, but I promise I will get on some other Newton book. I also am very keen on reading more Dolores Cannon, and then coming with you guys with like whatever it is that I can remember from it, and I took from it, and I learned from it, and comparing it to, like usual, the Akashic Records. But my goodbye message to you guys is, you don't die. Your character dies, but your soul doesn't die. You move on. And the Akashic Records say, and this is how I want to end it, the Akashic Records always say that the most limiting experience that a soul can have is actually right now when we're incarnated. So remember that. Remember that once you leave this incarnation, you feel free. You feel expansive and everything, you're home again. So don't think that it's going to be worse when you leave. It's actually your soul liberating from this three-dimensional density that is much harder to deal with. And once a soul leaves, it's like, it's almost like, I'm home. I can be my true essence again. So don't fear death, because it's just a liberation of the soul. Think of it that way. And when you do have a loved one that dies, of course, we're going to mourn them, because we're going to mourn the 3D version of connecting with them and loving them and hugging them. And we're all going to go through that grief process. We can't avoid that. But remember that when you leave, you're going to meet up with them in an even more expansive way. And the connection is going to be even better. And there's not going to be all these human limitations where I'm mad at you and you're mad at me and you did this to me once. And that's out the window. Once we're meeting up on another dimension, we're much wiser, we're much more expansive, and there's not all these 3D dense feelings and angers and resentments and things like that. So be happy when someone's able to understand that and accompany them in that, right? And if someone's going through a really tough time in their life, just remind them, hey, you're an amazing creator soul. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll get back to you with the next book.